there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to HP to XP. We are doing another one of our live stream interviews with one of our upcoming players in our campaign live stream. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring in your buddy and mine, Drew Trackhawk Crawford. Drew, what's happening?
Hello. Not a whole lot. Seems that all the tech is working on our end, so that's always good to go. How about you?
So far, so good. Everything's coming along. So, I have a question to start things off before we get into
a question.
the nitty gritty.
Oh.
You're from Canada, aren't you?
Oh yeah, there, buddy. We're all about the maple syrup and the beavers and the polar bears up here.
I always had a thing for Degrassi because I like girls who said a boot. But
a boot.
Yeah. But no, it's true, right? You are
yes.
You are in fact our sole person not from the United States.
Really? Actually? I thought we had like one person. No. Okay, yeah, no, you're right. Everyone else is well, I'm glad to be representing the top half of the hat that is the extended United States. Canada, great place, and hopefully that means that great characters and great stories will come out of here as well. So,
it's we certainly welcome your participation, and as I don't know. I was gonna go with something absolutely terrible, but
it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, we'll just
bit's done. Let's go to the next one.
moving forward. All right, we'll keep it going. Hey Friday, hey Steph, hey Fairy. Welcome to chat. Let's start with this. Actually, you're like a reasonably consistent presence in the world of streamcasting and esports commentary. How did you get into that?
Oh man. I would say by accident, but that would imply that there was absolutely nothing that I did to try and get into it. My first live stream was 2011 off of a PS4 at my parents' place. Obviously, we've kind of evolved since then, but so I started streaming strictly just because, there's a social aspect to it. I don't really interact all too much with people outside of the house, but online is a different beast altogether. I find that I can interact with as many people from as many different walks of life as possible, and streaming just facilitated that really well at the start. Later, it got a little out of control, but after I wouldn't say I was consistent for about 2 years as I went to school. It's anyone who says that you can stream full time and get a degree is completely full of it. That or they're in, I don't know, like cooking or something like that. Something where you have a lot of spare time. I did live broadcast television production, and that did not give me a whole lot of time. So I wasn't consistent for about 2 years. But during that 2 years, there was something called the Calgary Esports League that reached out to me, and originally they were wanting me to help with the technical content, but as soon as they realized I had a presence and experience casting, they got me on stage to cast the various tournaments and things they were holding. And that was kind of my first toe in the pond, so to speak. That was about 3 years ago at this point.
Okay.
And then from there, it just kind of bloomed out of control. People knew who I was from that event, and I started getting requests and contracts, and eventually reached a point where DreamHack Canada in 2019 reached out to me, and they wanted me to cast the League of Legends finals live in Montreal, Quebec. And so that was kind of before COVID hit. That was the peak that I kind of hit, being flown out to Quebec and casting that live. So that's basically how I ended up here. And then, well, for this, I saw the ad on Facebook before it was taken down. And that was lucky because, yeah, reached out and went through the process, and here I am today.
So talk to me about kind of um, getting in on the casting aspect. What is I think there are probably I mean, obviously this is Twitch. Most
Mhm.
people who are on here probably have a sense of what that is. I, on the other hand, am an old man and found out that Twitch was a thing in September. So maybe you could
Mm.
tell me what it is so that I understand it a little bit better.
So casting specifically for esports is basically the exact same thing as play-by-play commentary for the radio for hockey, NFL, something like that. Basically, we're providing live context or play-by-play for the various games that, for me, it's mostly League of Legends, which is a top-down, uh, very popular game right now. But I've also done Overwatch. We're going to be doing Valorant as it starts. It seems to be on the uprise, and so on and so forth. So best I can describe it would be just that. If you've listened to hockey on the radio, you've heard the equivalent of casting of play-by-play or color commentary.
Sure. So having listened to a lot of hockey, having listened to a lot of baseball,
Hmm.
I have a sense of what that's like. However, I also know that those sports are ones where the language is pretty firmly established. Is that the same case with something like League of Legends or some of these other games? Like, it is there as clear of a lexicon to describe what players are doing?
Yes and no.
Let's start with
Um,
yes and then explain no.
so the yes is there's words to describe every single thing that happens. Every single
Okay.
champion is a champion. Every single champion has their own names. So Senna, Aatrox, Amumu, etc.
Hmm.
Um, every single champion has abilities that you can call their names. The no part comes in when you're actually doing play by play. A good some of the abilities that champions have are not easy to say in a play by play context. You're
Okay.
not able to, in the same way that people don't really describe every single hockey shot as a exactly what they are. No play by play is going like every single time. Well, that was an amazing wrist shot. That was a slap
Right.
shot. That was like there's other ways of describing it that sound more exciting and also keep the flow of your cast on point.
Hmm.
So a good example is Vigar has a cage ability that basically stuns people.
Okay.
And so people don't refer to it as Event Horizon. They refer to it as the baby cage or
Okay.
dropping the cage on. And so there's things like that where we forego the technical term
Sure.
in for something a little easier to get off the cuff
Sure. And more colorful, I would imagine.
and more colorful. Yeah, dropping
Sure.
the baby cage or dropping the cage on someone sounds a lot more exciting than. And Figure steps forward and uses Event Horizon. It's like no,
Right. Sure.
yeah.
How do you is there a what's the process like to prepare for one of those tournaments? Like do you know who players or teams are going to be? Do you
Oh
know
yeah.
background on those players to be able to refer to the players themselves in contrast to the characters that they are playing in the game? What does that process look like?
So generally, the champions. I wouldn't say we know exactly who's going to be played, but we have the rough pool of champions that are probably going to be played.
Okay.
Similar to hockey, there's lines, there's metas, there's specific players who are probably going to show up more often than not. And there's also going to be players or champions that have more of an impact than not. And so I can the it basically starts with I get the contract, I get the players, I get the teams, and I start the research of on the players themselves. There's a whole host of online media that I can consume on, okay, this player plays this champion a lot, this is what they've played recent games, this is what their win rate is, this is what they're most comfortable doing. Then I can watch VODs or previous games that the teams have played, so I can get an idea of their play style. And of course, this is all if I don't already know the players.
Sure.
A lot of the time I'll be casting players that I do know or that I have experience or history with. And
Mhm.
so that becomes a lot easier. Uh, the hard part basically comes uh, during the game when you have to keep things somewhat interesting or exciting. And mostly that's where having a second caster on desk. Normally it's for the cast I mostly do, it's there's a color caster or commentary, someone who knows the majority of the technical stuff, and then there's me who's the play by play, and we'll just
Sure.
bounce off each other. uh that's the tough part I find, because
Mhm.
finding relevant things to talk about when nothing's going on to try and keep
Yeah.
audience engagement
Sure.
is yeah, there's only so many times you can ask about the weather or make
Right.
the same joke about something. So,
Yeah.
especially across 3-4 hour casting, uh,
Mhm.
keeping keeping fresh material kind of going through is often the hardest part I find.
Yeah, I would think in a lot of ways it would be like Major League Baseball in that respect, right? You
Yeah,
know, a typical game is at least 3 hours. It's not uncommon to have games stretched to 4 hours in the major leagues. And, you know, whether you're talking about TV commentators for a local team or the radio commentators for a local team, there's a lot of time that you're just filling trying to keep audience engagement. So I'd imagine it's probably similar to that as
yeah,
and
very
not
much.
having the same kind of like commercial break schedule
God,
that other
no.
sports do, you know.
It's so cut. Like between the games, yeah, we'll run commercials and everything, but as soon as
Mhm.
Champ Select is back up, you're back on the desk, and then maybe you'll have a break in between when the Champion Select ends and the game starts. But
Mhm.
usually, we're talking like 30 seconds to a minute.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, we're we're on air, we're bantering, of a 3 hour program, probably about 2.5 plus.
Sure.
So yeah,
Sure.
that can get tiring.
How has COVID and lockdown changed things? Were you already doing most of this virtually, or was more of it in person and now you've had to adapt?
Some of it, yes. There's definitely a lot of online casting. The problem is a lot of tournaments are it's a lot harder to have an online tournament just due to various people's internet connection. Um, Logistics become a lot harder. So
Mhm.
there hasn't been as many local tournaments or things like that that I can uh, jump onto. But we're hoping that'll change
Sure.
sooner rather than later.
Right.
It can't stay. It won't stay like this forever. So
No, it won't. You know,
no,
this is I think for everybody, uh, at the very least, if you don't have anyone who has become seriously ill or died from all of this, at the very least, it is a massive disruption.
yeah.
Um,
I'm
but,
sure it's disrupted
but
everything going on with you as well. Like,
oh yeah, the
yeah.
entire yeah. I mean, uh, well, yeah. I mean, on a professional level, I went from running a gym to
Ooh.
pivoting a third of my business into live streaming a Dungeons and Dragons game like that.
Could have done worse, I guess.
I made I we we made a left turn at Albuquerque because that's what the business environment dictated, and um, you know, in the same sort of token, you know, my wife is a grammar school teacher. She's been
Ooh.
teaching from home since March. You know, it is it's a very strange world that we're in right now. And
It
you're
really
right,
is.
it is a temporary time. You know, this uh it's hard to remember some days, but
Yeah.
this we will get past this. The world
And we'll still be playing D&D.
we'll still be playing D&D. There will still be esports. Uh, yeah, the we may not we will not return to where we were before, but we will find
No.
a new normal that is hopefully sustainable and healthy and whatnot. So I'd like to go ahead and then bring this around
Mm,
to this game in specific. So you said you threw your hat in the ring for this game because you
I
saw
did,
the
yes.
Facebook profile, the Facebook ad. What were you setting out to find a live stream game like this, or were you just looking for a D&D game, and what made you jump into this one?
I mean, the portions that spoke to me was the I obviously do a lot of live stream content, so the live streaming definitely spoke to me in regards. Um, I didn't expect to be a player. I fully expected that I would probably most likely end up on technical or something like that. Turns out, as with a few other things, people felt I would be better in front of a camera. So I guess I should probably just accept that at this point. That you know, I'm just gonna have to get used to staring at a camera lens more often than not. Um, that was the key reason. As for whether I was expecting exactly what you guys put together, I can't say I did. I've seen a lot of ads with similar kind of pretenses where it was really just, hey, we want to do a live stream, but it's mostly just so that we can get a group of people, like-minded individuals, to play a game who are a little more serious about the
Mm-hmm.
game.
Sure.
Generally, the live stream games that I've seen, it's less about you know, uh, having a something to grow and more just finding a group of people who actually take things seriously rather than just show up at the table and throw whatever they feel like during
Mm-hmm.
that day. So I was very pleasantly surprised that it was very much not that and very much a situation of wanting to grow and wanting to expand things and so on so forth. So yeah.
Cool. How long have you been playing D&D?
Oh boy. Just shy of a decade, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Because it was 2009, like not early, late 2009 that I played uh, my first game as a player.
Okay.
Uh, but then there was also about a 6 month period between the end of that campaign. So that campaign went on for 2 years, and then there was like a about a 6 month gap before the next game took off, and then after that one, I became more of a DM. So
Okay.
yeah, just shy of a decade, I would say is the rough number.
And you stream one of your D&D games now, right? On
Yes,
your channel?
yeah, not exactly the game. So D&D behind the screen is a bit different.
Okay.
I flat out told my players, I was like, look, I don't care what you guys, we're here to play D&D first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's being streamed is something you shouldn't care about.
Okay.
And so it's very much a complete opposite of this, where it's
Mm-hmm.
more I wanted to show what I was doing behind the screen, what DMs are kind of uh doing when running the game, rather than
Mm-hmm.
just showing what the because everyone knows what the players are doing. Everyone watches Critical Role. Everyone watches, uh, whatever variant of the podcast, or uh,
Mm-hmm.
my mind blanked on whatever other
Sure.
large scale D&D games are. Everyone knows about the player, what the players are experiencing, and everyone watches from the player's perspective. But I've never seen a stream where they go into detail during the stream or show what's going on behind the screen for the DM during that. They'll have, interviews after the fact, or they'll have like prep sessions where it's like, this is what we're going to do. But I found that there was a lot of people who were asking, well, how do you actually DM? How do you actually go about taking all these concepts in your plan and implementing it? Or more importantly, what happens when things go wrong? How often are you fudging rolls? How often are you making these little tweaks? How do you know when to make these tweaks? And so the entire point of D&D behind the stream was to kind of lift that veil, um,
Sure.
and let people see it. Let people see when I deliberately, roll a dice on cam, see it's a 5, or see it's a 15 or something, and I basically just looking at uh player health or whatever the situation is, and just kind of going, okay, do I have to tweak this? Did I accidentally make this too hard? How are things kind of progressing?
Right.
And so on and so forth. And see, it's very much not a D&D stream for players. It's definitely more focused on uh the aspiring DMs, or even just DMs who are struggling when they first start out. Because off the
Okay.
cuff is by making a plan and executing it is the easy part. It's when stuff doesn't go according to plan that being a
Well, yeah,
DM
making a
is.
plan is the easy part.
Yeah, it really is. Like,
Getting anybody on the other side of the screen to go along with it is a whole other story.
Oh yeah. Like my players went off script. It's like, yeah, that tends to happen more often than not. So that's the entire point behind that campaign. Uh, yeah, very very different concept from this.
Sure. So what got you into DMing? Was that something that once you started playing, you were like, oh, I'd like to take this on? Or was it well, I want to play and nobody else wants to do this godforsaken job?
A little bit of both, but
Okay.
I mean, the world that I'm sure this is kind of like you. You start DMing because you have a bunch of friends that you want to play D&D with, and they want to play D&D, but nobody else really wants to be the DM. So you're like, okay, well, I can do this. And then 8 years later, you have this fully constructed world with all of these nuances and everything, and you're like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like they're gonna run into all this stuff, and I know that they're gonna run into this stuff, but like there's a fascination about being the showrunner. I guess this kind of harkens back to being live broadcast,
Yeah.
knowing what's going on behind the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's where I kind of found my love of DMing is knowing what's going to happen, but still getting the satisfaction of dropping it on your players and having your players just be like, wait, what? And yeah, those kind of reactions, I kind of live for that, for those 5 or 10 seconds when you get to do the big reveal, yank back the
Yeah.
curtain and be like, haha, it was this person all along. And they're like,
Right. Right. Absolutely. And they would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids. Um, that's a Scooby Doo reference.
that is a Scooby-Doo reference.
Okay, just checking.
Yep.
Again, you fall into the category of player who is young enough to be my child. So there are times where I have to.
Scooby-Doo existed in the 90s, man.
That's true. That's true. You almost didn't, but
Jeez.
yes.
No, that's true. I was 6 years later, I wouldn't have. That 6 years makes a difference. 4-year-olds watch Scooby-Doo now.
That's 4-year-olds do watch Scooby-Doo.
They do, yeah.
My child is a 4-year-old watch Scooby-Doo. we still have quite a few DVDs around the house. So
I still have VHSs of my sister loves Disney, and so we still have VHSs of like the original Mulan and stuff like that. They definitely didn't age as well in terms of visuals that I quite remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, turns out VHS and DVD, there's a quality difference. Who knew?
There is without a doubt there is. Friday would like to know, speaking of Scooby-Doo, do you enjoy a good mystery in D&D, and if so, do you have any examples?
Good mystery. Yes, being the DM, I usually know the answer to the mystery. So that kind of makes it a little harder. As a player,
how do you construct a mystery for your players?
Ooh. Starting point is always the location, and what they could possibly run into. So actually, they're going to run into a bit of a mystery surrounding a area called the Desolation of Mana, I believe. And so there's an entire mystery surrounding that entire region, and I can't be too on the nose, but yes, it's magic related. So start there and just kind of work out, well, what's in the area? Okay, this is in the area, so this can come into play. I guess it comes down to I've planned a lot of. I'm sure you've run into this where you've planned the world to a point that you're literally just looking at your spreadsheet and going, okay, this is here and this is here, so these two can interact. So X plus X equals Y. There's your mystery.
Okay. I
As
actually do
yeah.
world building a little bit differently.
Ooh, how do you do?
The amount of detail that's on that map that's behind me on the wall is about as much detail as I know at any given point in time. I take a very 50,000 foot approach to world building because my thing is that I'm looking for that collaborative experience to not just be in the in-game storytelling, but I want the decisions that my players are making to really shape the world truly. And I don't think so. We've gone through character creation, and at this point, I know where all of your various characters are from and the significant parts of your backstories. But with very rare exception, none of the places that you're from existed before you all brought them into existence. I might have given them a name, but it was the things that you brought to the table and what you were looking for where I went, oh, okay, well then I need this city. You okay, what you're describing, you'd be from a city. Oh, well, you'd be from the country. Well, you'd be from some random set of farms. And oh, okay, well, now I have to build these things because I'm gonna need them pretty
I think
quickly
we
here.
touched on this during a very specific Drow who may or may not have prompted the creation
Yeah.
of an entire area that you hadn't
Yeah, yes.
foreseen.
Yes, there is a place on the map where I put a pin when I created the world map and went, "Oh, that's where the Drow live." And figured I wasn't going to touch that for weeks, months, a year, who knew? I didn't get
Turns
to
out it was 2 weeks later.
Yeah, no, didn't get to episode 0 before had to sit down and start working out the context of the deeper Drow society within our campaign.
That is the fun part, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. This game, when it is done well, in my opinion, is far more improv or extemp speech than it is classic drama. It is not a prepared script. It's not a novel. It's not, if I wanted the world to be exactly the way I wanted the world to be, I would just sit down and write a novel and I wouldn't get any other human beings involved because then I would have all the control in the world. I like the idea of having people go, "Oh, you thought you were going to do that? Now
So
what?"
here's the question, because I've run into this a number of times.
Mhm.
How do you handle the history then? Like, so a good example is one of my players. Their backstory is heavily involved in it with a deity, dwarven. Anyways, so there's a whole history related to that deity and their interactions on the land and everything, and they would likely know a lot of this,
Mhm.
and that history shapes an entire section of the dwarven culture as it would be part of, and
Mhm.
that in turn the dwarven society or the dwarven section of the world influences the rest of the world. So
Yeah.
like how do you manage the history aspect of it then?
So for me, I do a couple of things. First, I have a 7 foot long timeline on the counter behind me that goes
Okay.
back 5,000 years and details out significant moments in the evolution of these societies. And I
Only
write
5,000?
enough so far. That's all I've had to do. I have more paper. Um, and then what I do is I kind of say, okay, what is the world that I am going to drop players into? and I will sit down and write maybe. I mean, I think you guys got most of what I created, which was about maybe 15 pages. I
Yeah.
would not counting like rules documents and stuff like that, but just all the things about, here's the general history of the world, here's how the calendar works, things like that, which are things that I've put up on the HP to XP website, so anybody who's interested can get a sense of what that backstory is. And what I know is that that's what you all would know. That's what the players commonly would have an understanding of. And then as we got into character creation, and each of you pinned down where you were from in the world and started asking questions about it, I started writing out those sections, right? Oh, okay, you need to know this. Now I'm going to detail out A, B, C, and D, and that's going to give us this space where together you've said, here's a need, I'm going to fill that in some way. Hopefully, if you are prompting, if you're asking good questions and I'm yes-anding well, then not only am I able to tie it into things that have already been written into the history, but also leave me room to write more. Um, and I go, oh,
Nice.
okay, you've identified this. Well, now we're here. I have to go backwards. Um, and then for me, it really is just a matter of going back and re-looking at continuity, accepting the fact that I'm going to make decisions in game that then affect history,
Oh yeah.
and that's just how it's going to go. And you it's not just this forward path. It's a process of constantly having to go back and look at what you did, which is one of the joys of doing this as a live stream internet campaign, is that the morning after we finish, I can watch the whole thing again. I
And
don't
just go
have to
back and
I don't have to rely on whatever gibberish I scribbled in the middle of a moment. I can go
yeah.
back, rewatch it, and then go, okay, here's what I need to detail out now to make sure that this ties together.
Yeah, that's
And
been a huge benefit to live streaming. A lot of it kind of harkens back to the old Reddit joke. My players found out about a mountain that doesn't exist in their current timeline, and now one of them is asking, "What happened to that mountain?" Great question.
right.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Canada TV would like to know, what is a challenge you experienced as a DM or as a player, and how did you work around solving the problem?
only one problem.
You can pick one.
I feel like DMing
Pick
is
your
just like
favorite.
I feel like DMing is there's a movie and a book, The Martian, where um I the main character basically says being an astronaut is equivalent to just solving one problem after the next, and if you solve
Mhm.
enough problems, you get to go home. Bit of paraphrasing, but I feel like DMing is kind of similar to that.
Sure.
Um, you basically have to problem solve over and over and over and over again. And if you problem solve enough and you solve enough problems, your players are going to have fun, you're going to have fun, and the story that you're going to be telling is going to come to what would hopefully be a satisfying conclusion. Um, so part of how I handle those challenges is just try and give myself as much information to play with as humanly possible. Whether it's rules, different spells, the interactions, there's still interactions that catch me off guard to this day. Um, and then, of course, the new spells and things like that get added. It just kind of I found that you can never have too much information, and if you have enough information, generally it's just working your way through it and just going, okay, this works with this. And so therefore your question kind of is a similar interaction. So it's probably going to fall under the same kind of category. So it makes the most sense that it would interact in this way. Um, that's the way I handle DMing problems.
Okay.
As a player, we don't have that same amount of information. We have all the information that we know. we have all the information our character knows, and that's it. And sure, we can ask we can ask our DM as many questions as we want, but we are ultimately limited in the scope and scale of things that we know. And so that it doesn't really work in the same way. So most of the time, it basically just comes down to asking the question of, well, how would my character come across? How would my character ultimately want to deal with this? How would they instinctively deal with this situation? Are they
Sure.
a rash barbarian who's known for bar brawling? Well, they're probably not going to sit down and meticulously work out the details behind what's going on.
Mhm.
Um, so that's basically in a nutshell how I go about solving some problems.
Okay. When you are when you're in that situation as a DM and you have players who are doing a really good job of being in character, how do you also get them to engage in the what I think of as the right kind of metagaming, which is the reminder that one, you are playing a game, two, it is a collaborative game. And while in the real world, if this was reality, your your character may have hit a point where they went, "Oh, I'm done," and walk away. How do you help players work on finding that balance?
It's actually funny you asked that because we just had so in the current campaign that I'm running, two of the characters died. And
Okay.
so the group is basically, for all intents and purposes, in a group of four, if half of the characters die, it's basically a hard reset. You're starting from essentially session zero in terms of there's new characters, they're not going to be as socially integrated. So every bit of role play and every bit of everything that you've kind of worked up to this point is now gone.
Hmm.
Um, and so we did recently run into a situation where the players are not entirely sure how to start to recapture that, because the whole point of the first few sessions is of course to give the players a chance to socialize and deal with small little problems that ultimately lead to bonds and ultimately lead to them trusting one another and starting to engage more and more and more and more and more, and it just kind of goes out from there. Um, but they don't really get to do that because they're level 5 and they're currently dealing with what is essentially a massive war between nations.
Hmm.
And so there isn't really small scale things that they can deal with that wouldn't be incredibly boring for them to deal with. Goblins just don't really cut it at this point when you have a fireball and can literally wipe the map in a turn.
Right.
So what I ended up doing is I just told them, look, you can talk outside of the game and it's not going to be metagaming. You can talk to each other and you can have discussions and you guys can hash out things in sections where you might have wanted to say something, but either the situation didn't really allow for it or you just didn't feel comfortable at the time doing it, but
Hmm.
your character would.
Hmm.
And I think that might have started to get them back on the track of, okay, sure, my character might be a bit antisocial, but they are curious.
Hmm.
So while they might not innately want to talk to someone, these other two new characters have been fighting with us and, you know, working with us. My character's at least going to be a little curious of why they haven't just screwed off at this point. Because normal people, they would see, oh, two people who have a couple of wanted posters up in various towns and the mayor's blackmailing them to forcing them on a dangerous quest to save face and otherwise. Like, most people would kind of look at that and be like, yeah, I'm just not going to touch that. But these two characters they have stuck with you, so at the very least, you're probably going to be curious on why that is, and hopefully that hopefully that goes from curiosity to a little bit of trust, and we can start to build it back up from there.
Sure. Yeah, I think that it's important to remember as well that it is a game.
Yes.
It's not a um it's not a it's not some sort of standalone experience, right? It is a
No.
social shared experience between a group of people. And in the same way that you would have a conversation about what happened over a game of Risk or Monopoly, you're going to have a conversation about this game. And
Exactly. Yeah.
that's part of why you're doing it is to share with the people that you were playing with what was going on. I think where the idea of metagaming is important to avoid is the kind of metagaming where you as a player are doing things that your character
Character.
wouldn't know,
Yeah.
right? That's where
Or
it, and I mean it's going to happen. It's you are in fact the
your
character,
character.
which
Yeah.
means you know stuff. It's going to come out, you know.
Oh yeah. I basically just told them flat out, as long as you're not planning combat sessions or, oh,
Right.
you find out that you're facing off again, I don't know, a mind flayer next session, and you spend a week literally reading up all the mind flayer statistics, and you're like, okay, well, this is how we can counter as long as they're not doing that, I don't mind them, talking
Sure.
and, you know, uh, being the DM, I know a lot of things that the players do not, and I found that if I get too involved in the players' decisions,
Mm,
it ruins the authenticity of their ultimate decision on that.
sure.
And so I have been encouraging them to work on things as their group, as
Hmm.
uh, as themselves, as a group without me, because ultimately what they and if obviously if they have questions or things, they have to
Sure.
involve me. It's fine, but ultimately the social part of the game does fall on the player.
Hmm.
You can only do so much.
Right.
You can put us in a shopping episode every single time for now until the end of term. But if we just stonewall each other until the
Right.
until the cows come home, nothing's going to happen. So
Right.
ultimately, I do have to put at least I have to put the trust in the players that they want the social aspect to work just as much as they want the combat or the puzzles or all of the fantastical things that make D&D uh a fantasy game. Role play just happens to fall into the category of things that, we as DM can't force. I can't
Right.
I can't force it. So
Right, for sure. So Fairy would like to know, how do you deal with character deaths in your games if there's a chance they might get brought back to life after the session, such as revivify, reincarnate, stuff like that?
bit dependent on the spell. Obviously, reincarnation is going to be a very different situation than revivify. Um, and even then, revivify is I do follow the Matt Mercer uh, increased DC rule set that he instituted. I've never been a fan of the idea that death can't be permanent. Is there ways
Right.
to avoid it? Absolutely. But death comes for everyone, and I've always wanted that to be present in the games. If my players come to me and go, "We're worried that our characters are going to die," I treat that as a good thing because it
Yeah,
means they understand that there is a real threat there. As for how I
and they're
deal with
invested.
exactly, that's the best moment when you're like, "Oh, you guys are worried that your characters are going to die? Oh, you're invested. Oh man, I'm thanks guys. You're making me cry." Um as for how I deal with character deaths though, it's never pretty. Just I've no matter what, it is always going to suck. some
Mhm.
players ultimately deal with it differently. Some players are angry. Some players are upset. Some players just want it to be over. Um, there's one of the players at my table who has flat out told me, "Look, if my character's going to die, don't don't make me go several rounds without it being time. Just get it done. Just
Sure.
I don't." And
Yeah, I don't want to
ultimately,
linger.
exactly. And ultimately, when their character did die, they ended up laughing because they had come to terms with the fact that their character would be happy to go out in a way that was a little bit stupid, a little bit heroic, and this kind of filled both categories. So that wasn't bad. What was harder was when one of the players, he was playing a character that was ultimately going to betray the party. And so his death, so to speak, was very much not an emotional moment for him, but very much an emotional moment for me and everyone else at the table. Because I thought this was going to be a 6-session character, and it was a 24-session character.
Okay.
And there's a big difference between playing with a character for 6 sessions and 24 sessions. So that one was
18
really,
sessions.
yeah, that one was really hard for me personally. Um, because yeah, ultimately, if your players are invested, you and the DM are going to end up invested, and it's never easy to just look at your players and go, they're dead. There's
Mhm.
nothing you can do.
Right.
That kind of like that kind of moment of like there is literally nothing you can do is by far I haven't really answered the question. That I guess the end of the the culmination of it is I have to deal with it on a case by case basis because no character death will ever be the same, and no
Mhm.
character death will ever be easy. There's ones that are easier, but there will never be a moment where telling your character or telling your player your character is dead is going to be easy. And I don't think it should be. I don't think we as
Sure.
DMs should ever feel like I don't think we should feel that it should be easy. I don't think we should be in a situation where we're like omnipotent gods going, "Yeah, your character's dead. Ha, roll a new one." Like that's not I never felt that that was our role, so to speak. So,
Sure. Yeah, I think that it's always a good idea to acknowledge that people who care about something are going to have feelings about that thing that invest them
definitely.
in it, and that they should get the space to deal with that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to happen. It is part of the game. It is not the same as playing a video game, right?
No.
At all. And that's been something that I've dealt with personally. And I'm going to loop back to Ferry's question just a little bit in a second, but
Mhm.
I think this is an important idea that I'd at least like to talk about is that I've played with a lot of people recently who have never played the game before and
Okay.
who are in their late 30s, getting into their 40s, coming to the game for the first time, but they've played a lot of video games. And watching them have to kind of make that transition into this is a very different thing. Like, stakes are a real thing. The choices that you make have lasting impact. There is no save point that you're going back to. There are no respawns necessarily, right?
Necessarily, yeah.
You can't solve the problem by just iterating, right? And video games, you can in a lot of ways. You can just go, I don't understand how to solve this problem. I'm just going to
Guess
bump
and
my
check.
head up against it 400 times, and eventually I'm going to find the pattern, right? Because
Can't do that.
programmed. It's programmed. There, if sooner or later I will decode the logic of the pattern, and I can move forward to the next point. D&D doesn't offer you that. Um, it's also
That
been
must be
interesting.
challenging.
I it's really interesting to watch as somebody who has never been a big video gamer, like I've never been good at it. Like I play occasionally. You know, I got really into the original Splinter Cell on the first Xbox
Ooh.
for about 3 weeks. I didn't win. I didn't beat the thing. Like I've never beat a video game in my life, but um,
Even like Witcher or like Sky, like those never really interest you, or you just never really got
in
to
that case, I've never
experience it?
played it,
Okay.
so it would be tough for me to beat it because I haven't played it. But um, but like I don't find that iterative process fun. That constantly like let me just do this again, let me do it again, let me do it again to figure out the pattern. I don't find that entertaining. I love D&D. I love the fact that okay, I'm going to do this and it's immediately going to have a consequence, or it's not and it's going to have a consequence down the road,
Oh,
but I don't know. And when I bump up against this, it's going to work or it's not. But there's no do-overs. And that for me has always been a thing about role-playing games that I always loved in contrast to the video game environment. The video game environment to me is um role-playing games to me are like playing chess with a clock against an opponent sitting across from you. Video games are in my head like playing chess sitting there with the board practicing moves, going, if I do this, this happens. Okay, what comes next? And because you have that time to reset and replay and
it's funny you use chess as an analogy though, because chess is very much a if this then that
yeah,
uh
absolutely.
sort of game. And yeah,
Oh
no,
yeah,
I
it's
yeah,
ultimately a game of logic.
yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I follow the yeah, D&D and video games do have very different uh abilities to solve problems. The fact that you don't have a respawn or a quick save or something in D&D
Yeah.
definitely is very prevalent. Um I don't think there's I think there are games out there that touch on it.
Hmm.
Baldur's Gate is close. Witcher ultimately is close. There's a lot of games where you might think you don't have a you might think there's no consequence, but later down the road it surprises you. And
Hmm.
I do like I'm going to be playing the absolute crap out of Cyberpunk 2077 because I played the tabletop 2070 or not 20s, the original Cyberpunk one.
Yeah.
And so it'll be fun to see how they've transitioned a tabletop into a video game. So
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and what's interesting is you bring up Baldur's Gate, which is obviously a D&D setting. It's very much informed by the structure of Dungeons and Dragons.
there are
I
tieflings.
I assume Witcher is sort of the same thing, that it's informed by this world of D&D. And
What about
you contrast that with something like, you know, a Halo game, a Modern Warfare game, something like that, where those do feel more like, oh, okay, well, I just have to do this enough time to figure out, essentially like where I'm supposed to look when, and I'm going to work my way through it. And obviously, it scales. It's the challenges uh, come off differently at different levels of play, things like that. But um,
I can understand that, yeah.
yeah. And again, I could be completely wrong. I am not a video game player. If I had this conversation,
I think you need to like in the same way that we can chat about D&D and have similar opinions and similar like concepts and understandings. Video games is are even more vast than D&D. Um
sure,
yeah, I mean
yeah,
D&D's
tough
gone
to
all the way back to
categorize
like
as a single thing.
exactly, yeah. To be honest, I would treat D&D 2nd edition as a completely different beast from 5th edition. Like
Oh,
I would
yeah.
treat them as completely different games altogether, despite the fact they're both playing D&D.
Hmm.
Um, ultimately, I get what you're saying. I think it's more there's not really a good way to put this other than it's different when you're playing against another person. In the same way that you can play against a bot in chess and you can apply the guess and check method, when you're playing against another player, when there's other variables involved
Yeah.
uh other than just, guess and check method, things become a little bit more complicated. Um
Sure. I think that's a great way to
so
to
yeah,
to
I'll,
explain
I'll,
it.
I'll leave it. I'll leave it at
Yeah.
that.
So jumping back for a half a second to
Oh yeah.
Fairy's question. Um,
Ooh, character
from
death.
from a DM standpoint, what's your process for being prepared for the fact that one of these characters that has died might get brought back to life and that might not happen for a long enough period of time that your player has created another character?
So the first thing that every single person who sits down at one of my tables is going to understand is that your character is potentially going to die and,
Hmm.
potentially going to come back, but they will never be your character again. Once they have died for a significant amount of time,
Okay.
aka if you die at level 3 and you get to level 13 and you're able to bring them back, you are not going back to that character. It's just
Okay.
there is no, it breaks so many things. And I understand that. I think a good example is in Critical Role recently. This is
We'll probably
not.
hold off on this one only because I think we might get spoilery.
Have you guys not
Um,
got up to that point?
well, not
No.
everybody on the internet has.
Oh, it's like 5, it's like 7 sessions back. Okay, fine.
Doesn't matter. We don't get
Okay,
to be the timekeeper of when people find their fun for
fair
the
enough,
first
fair
time.
enough. In that, okay, harkening back, way, way,
I
way,
think
way, way
without
back, there was.
using character names though, and without
Yeah,
using specific situations, we can use that
yeah.
dynamic as illustrative.
If you come back at level, like, what is it, 11, I think you get resurrection, or 13. Anyways, um, when a cleric gets resurrection, yes, they can bring back the character. Unfortunately, resurrection literally states in there that they come back exactly. Um, is it reincarnation or is it? Anyways, higher level non-changed race. Resurrection.
Yeah, resurrection doesn't make any
Resurrection doesn't
changes.
make any changes.
Reincarnation,
Nation.
you
Yeah,
have yeah, your
yeah,
race may change,
yeah.
your gender may
So
change.
reincarnation is a different beast altogether.
Yeah.
But for that one, they'll come back exactly as they were, which
Mhm.
means that you are asking me, hey, in a campaign where I have a level 13 or whatever character, I want to go back to playing my level 3 character. Well, first
Sure.
off, no, you're not going to be able to adventure with the party. Just straight up. Any encounter that they face will instantly kill you. So there
Hmm.
is a balance aspect to it. The second portion of it is thematically, I don't want my players to be comfortable in the idea that they'll be able to go back to the character at any point that they choose later down the road. It's just it's messy. The process of even bringing the character back is it's not always going to be guaranteed either.
Sure.
And so if they write in like, oh, this character, um, well, we can talk about this. Vex is a great example. She was already revivified before the campaign started.
Mhm.
So her DC for surviving was already higher than everyone else's, and
Sure.
that ended up playing a significant role later down the line.
Right.
Long and the short of it is, the characters that die are either dead permanently, or they have something that they're going to do anyways in the story that will
Hmm.
not allow the player to take control of them. The evil PC that died in my campaign, they're never going to go back to the player, because if they do, that will have the player playing an evil character against the party, and that creates a terrible social dynamic. Um I never want to foster the player versus player mentality. Does it
Sure.
happen? Absolutely. Do I bring in people to play the evil bad guys? Of course, it's fun.
Yeah.
But those are guests. They're brought in
Mhm.
specifically for that. And the players understand that. To take a player who, they've been playing with for now 20, 30 sessions as a trusted person, and then suddenly have them be like, I'm evil now. I'm going to be playing against you guys. And it breeds a mentality I don't want at my table.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's one where um, I think there's a lot of different ways of handling it, right? I think that
yeah.
um,
Is there even
you
a
know,
right way to handle it? Like,
no, I don't think there is. I think like so many things, it's very specific to the game that you're playing, the group you're playing with, how you handle things.
yeah.
Um, I don't know that there's a single right way. Canadian TV would like to know, what is your favorite race and favorite class in D&D and why? And I can
Eric
tell that they are
Aarakocra.
actually from Canada because they use a
Canadiana.
U in favorite.
That's very true. Favorite race, Aarakocra. Just straight
Okay.
up. They're so much fun. Um, as for favorite class, I've really come onto the Bard recently.
Okay.
There's just so many role playing potential out of the Bard. I wanted to play a Bard, but I couldn't make this character work with it. Like, just
Sure.
in terms of a
It would have
class,
been
it would have
difficult.
been weird and difficult, and just can't do that. So love those. Second choice, there's so many races. Um, I don't know. I am a sucker for human every once in a while. There's something funny about having Joe the farmer suddenly level up, and now he can
Right.
take on a dragon as He-Man. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm a sucker for that kind of idea as well. But Aarakocra first character ever, and definitely first favorite race to play.
Cool. Yeah, you also use a U in color, Canadiana, so that also gave it
Boom.
away. Steph would like to know, what are your top three favorite video games?
You're gonna
I'm going to
make me.
say as a player.
You're gonna make me only name three. Okay.
Yes, you have to pick three. For now, you can change
For
your mind.
now,
You are an agenic being. You are allowed to change your opinion as you reconsider down the road. But for now, what are your three favorites?
Shadow of the Colossus is up there. Ooh, The Last of Us. Um, and ooh, there's so many good choices. Star Fox 64. Boom.
Okay.
Or Smash Bros. Melee. You know what? That was an OG as well. There's so many good games from over the years. I'm just gonna stick with those for
How
now.
about River Raid? Did you like River Raid?
I never got around to playing it.
Uh,
Um, so
someday.
I
Someday.
someday. Let's
Someday.
you know what? Original Duck Hunt on the NES with the stupid orange pistol.
Yep.
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 Let's go way back for no.
Did you grow up in a place where there was still any significant arcade gaming going on, or were you mostly playing consoles?
Nope. There definitely was.
Okay.
My parents never really liked the arcade though, so
Sure. Okay.
it was much better to go over to a friend's house and play whatever they had.
Okay.
Uh, so as for arcades, I still to this day I think hold a record on Time Crisis. Time Crisis 1 and Time Crisis 4 that was in the Cineplex. And I never got good at DDR, but that was always there's a DDR kid who's like one of the best in the world, lives
Okay.
in Calgary, and we catch him every once in a while at like there's two DDR consoles, one at a bar and then another one at Rec Room. We'll catch him there every once in a while, and at least watching him is just I don't get it. Like it's how like you can't
Sure.
he has so many songs and it seems like he's memorized them, but then he'll challenge someone to just hit random and go through it, and it's like you can't have memorized all of them to that point. It's just like, oh my goodness. I'm guessing you were an arcade kid though.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
more than anything else. I mean,
I'm
I
reading your mind.
go,
Pinball. You were a
going.
pinball wizard.
I was never a pinball wizard. I always enjoyed pinball. The original Star Wars, um, New Hope game that was out was one that I
Ooh,
always loved playing. Um, Pac-Man, of course, was
Pac-Man, of
always
course, yeah.
fun. You know, um,
Space Invaders.
Space Invaders was good. Yeah, it has been interesting in the last, I mean, again, maybe 10 years that sort of the arcade bar has been a thing,
It's
where
crazy, isn't it?
it's really amazing to see the comeback of games like Joust and stuff like that, and seeing people um, investing the time and energy in playing them. So
What was that boxing one with was it Mike
Tyson's Punch
Tyson?
Out.
Tyson's Punch Out. That was a fun one.
There you go, Matt. We got that in for you.
Oh, Matt said it. Of course,
Yeah,
Matt says it.
yeah,
Okay,
he
that
said
makes.
it. He said it in chat right after the fact that he likes playing humans
Oh, yeah, I guess we should probably have the stream open, shouldn't
and
I?
elves as a class. Back when elves were a class.
Back
So
for class.
they used to be. It was not a
They
race. It
used to be,
started
yeah.
off as a class.
That's always a good memory.
Uh-huh. So I have given everybody the opportunity to ask me a handful of questions during
Ooh,
these. So,
I
as
think I've
a
asked you more than a
player,
handful.
you have, but as a player, are there any things in particular that you would like to ask?
Hmm. Um, we've covered a lot of stuff. I think people recognize that we've talked about a lot of stuff. So, um, but with that in mind, let me pull out my 20 question list, starting with number one.
Go for it.
No, I don't have the foreplanning of uh of Jacob, unfortunately. Um, I've always been curious in terms of is how is the story going to progress? Like, is there an actual overarching like plot somewhere in this, or is it mostly like we're going to be going where we go, and the story is going to progress depending on where we end up? Like, how is that narrative playing out?
There are, I would say, if I distill it, there are probably three major NPCs who are each setting out to accomplish their own aims. And in some places, their aims overlap. In many ways, their aims are divergent to one another. And their stories will be happening whether you interact with the world at all or
Or
not.
not? Okay.
And you may or may not bump into them. I I don't know that because I do have an idea of what their stories are, and I'm not going to force them into your way if you're going the wrong direction. However, for at least one of them, their plans are large enough that their plans will end up affecting everything if they're not otherwise foiled along the way by one of these other major powerful characters, or circumstances, or their boat hits a reef and they drowned. I mean,
Anything's
I
possible.
yeah, and I believe that um I I believe in doing stupid shit like actually rolling for that, even if it's never even if it's something that no player or an audience ever sees. Like
No, I 100% agree.
there are real risks in the world, and if major powerful characters sort of have a carte blanche to go wherever they want, then once again, it's not a living world. It's not a world
No,
where risks matter. Now, if one of those characters is a god, well, guess what? Doesn't matter if they're boat sinks.
yeah,
But those, to me, those characters aren't necessarily compelling or interesting because, like you said, when you have the omnipotent, omniscient, all powerful, cannot die character, there's nothing there.
no,
Like that's not from a storytelling aspect.
no.
So you probably are not going to have to face a god anytime soon.
Anytime soon, because like,
Oh, what could happen? I don't know who any of you are going to invoke or summon at any point in time. So
I feel like my character, you probably don't have to worry about that.
I'm not so much worried about you.
No. Cthulhu is not on our to-do list. Last I checked, you know what? I'll keep you up to date if the shopping list changes.
He is currently sleeping, but
Ooh,
we'll see if the
oh,
alarm
that's.
goes off.
Why'd you have to say that?
You just
Call of Cthulhu. Ah, good times. Um,
what else? You
in
got
re-
anything else for me?
ooh, I'm more just surprised nobody has asked any questions about my character. It's like I am so interesting enough that they're like, "Hey, we don't give a crap about your character." um,
Would like to know,
let's see.
Drew, what can you tell us about your character?
Oh, as I say that,
They literally typed it and it came up at about exactly the same moment. So
I cursed myself just by
yes.
opening my mouth. I cursed.
See, I told you I have no idea what any of you will summon.
We summoned. We summoned them.
Yes. So tell us about your character
Okay.
to the extent that you're comfortable sharing.
Well, tell me to shut up if I'm sharing too much because
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
I'm not a very secretive person. So
No, we figured that out.
yeah. So if I get too far into something, you could just tell me to shut up. So I am playing a character known as Veirona, and they
Okay.
are a sorcerer. Currently, they'll be introducing themselves as human, even though they're fairly certain they're not. That's a little bit in there.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, they're the only character that's going to be coming out of your Commonwealth area. So that's going to be interesting. Yeah, I I I can honestly share as much as they want in terms of physical like description, because I sadly haven't gotten character art yet, other than the like the scribble sketch to there. So we'll have to wait on the full color. So one of the taller, they're female, 6'4", roughly 170 pounds. Not the physically strongest, but very dexterous. White goldish hair, usually tied into a bun. It's a bit of a hack job. She kind of cuts it herself because she hates it getting in her way. She's been traveling for a little while, so there is a little bit of weathering on her clothing and otherwise. Yeah, that's the gist of her. Uh, I mean,
I think that's a
yeah,
reasonable starting point.
reasonable starting point.
There is enough that I think will come out in play that we can see how that comes out in play. Just so you know, for future reference,
Mhm.
6'4" and 170, you did not have to add not the strongest in the party.
Well, okay. We haven't done her interview yet though. So I didn't want to like
Yeah.
I didn't want to spoil the
Oh, you weren't.
spoil the
You
surprise.
weren't spoiling it. That yeah. Yes, if you describe somebody as 6'4" and 170, one does not anticipate that
No.
they are deadlifting 4 times their body weight. So
No. I know that from experience quite well.
yeah.
No, but that's the gist of her. Voice, well, you'll all hear that at the time at the
Yeah,
start.
that'll come out in time for
That'll come out.
sure. Um, Jumping back though, did you have any more questions for me either about the world, the campaign, um,
Hmm. Uh,
me, anything? What do you want to know?
well, I want to know everything about you. So,
Most of it's on the internet.
most of it is on. Yeah, that's the
A, g-
frustrating part about being in the public eye.
a good
Like,
Google search will turn up most of it.
exactly, exactly. And I did Google search you because it was like as soon as they were, as soon as you guys were all like, "Oh yeah, this is an actual thing." I was like, "All right, well, time to find the business. Time to go there. Time to go, sir. Where is you located? So let's backtrace your IP." I mean, what? I didn't go that far. No, I think you'll do
That's
a.
why I have Tor on my laptop.
Ooh, see, we have to go after that NordVPN. Although I don't think anyone can match Sam's skit level, so
Probably not, but
probably not. Answered, but yeah. I jumped on the chat now, and I wish I didn't because now it's distracting. It's like the being a Twitch streamer, you have the chat in the corner of your eye, and as soon as something goes up, you're like, yes, squirrel, squirrel,
and
squirrel.
and and that's why we are not, as players or a DM, going to be looking at chat during the games
I
for
had to turn
just that
chat.
reason.
I had to turn chat off after the first session of because I thought I'd be able to like keep an eye there and ask questions. No, you don't, and it just becomes a distraction after there.
Yeah, it's not. So there's this fun fact that people like to say that they're good at multitasking, and the reality is that no human is good at multitasking. It's
No,
not a You're not physiologically capable of it. You are good at being a hummingbird. You can task switch quickly, perhaps, but nobody can multitask. So
no,
you bounce back and forth.
not
And
effectively. No,
and task switching comes with tremendous costs to awareness, which is why, in this context, we don't want people watching chat when we're actually playing the game. In this moment, it's totally cool.
plus
But
they'll give us the answer. It's like cheating on a test. They'll
well,
be
and
like, oh,
yeah, and my hope is that there will be things that the community knows that the players don't. There will be live streams, there will be Patreon content, there will be YouTube content where I'm specifically asking the players, don't look at it. I mean, we'll be on the honor system because I think everybody's an adult, but don't look at it. There will be stuff that will spoil your experience.
actually, this is a question that I've been curious on.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of like going back and grabbing stuff from like third, fourth edition and retexturing it to work with within the 5e system.
Mm-hmm.
Um is that something that you like to do as well to like keep things fresh, keep people on their toes? It's like, haha, this didn't exist in 5e, so there's no way you can know about it.
Yeah, well, so I certainly think that anything that has been in the game is fair play. It's easy enough to redo a stat block. If you're talking about a 1E or a 2E creature, it's easy to redo a stat block
Easy.
and bring him into a current campaign. That's not hard at all. And I don't really think of that as homebrew in the classic sense. I'm personally not a huge homebrew fan. I think that good homebrew a lot of requires a lot of due diligence, and it requires a lot of play testing to make sure it's not going to be broken. So I don't do a lot of it because it's just not my thing. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with it if people enjoy it and want to do it as a DM and do it in their game. Cool. You
That's
know,
fair.
it's just not something that I find my enjoyment in, but I will absolutely manipulate either stuff that exists in the archives or um creatures that are no longer part of the um no longer part of the kind of current compendium. Yeah, I'll definitely go back and grab something if I think that it's worth bringing in.
So then for like wizards and such, where like they're going to be making their own spells. I know sorcerers don't necessarily do that because we got our meta magic stuff, but like how is that going to work exactly? Because are you just going to like reflavor some spells to work with what they're kind of looking at, or
I
are
think
you
it's
going to be like
go ahead.
making entire new? Are you just going to be making like entire like Widowgasp's Web of Fire?
Sure.
That did not exist.
Right.
And so now, are you going to be doing anything like that in terms of like homebrew?
I think that a lot of that depends on the players, right? It depends upon, if you have a character who's a wizard and they want to explore that end of their character, then it's not going to be oh no, you can't do that. I mean, it's certainly part of the game. It's a matter of finding, okay, what do you want to accomplish? First and foremost, what do you want to achieve? Okay, you want to achieve this. What school of magic does that fit into? What types of things would be involved? What does it look like most in what already exists? Now let's start tweaking. Let's start polishing. Let's start grinding edges off and finding how to take this and reshape it to fit what you're looking for. To me, that's a really good approach. That said, if I've got somebody whose love is crafting that stuff and they come and present something and say, here's what I want to do, here's the work I've done on it. Well, cool. Now let's sit down and look at it. That's different than, hey, I've got an idea and, throwing it on the table. That and I mean, I think that can work in some situations and in some games. To me, the big thing is just it's always about a dialogue. It's always about having a conversation as a DM with your player if that's what they're trying to accomplish.
Actually, this is an interesting thing. How do you handle historical inaccuracies within D&D? So this was
this is fantasy, so what do you mean?
Yes. Well, a good example that was actually brought to my attention recently is slings.
Okay.
Slings in D&D, and I will agree with them on this, are incredibly underpowered compared to what they actually are capable of doing. So I understand the point of them existing in D&D. They're supposed to be a commoner's weapon. They're one silver piece. They're super cheap. What they brought forward to my attention was 1d4 bludgeoning damage for a weapon that historically was, and even to modern context, was more effective and easier to mass produce and often used in lieu of short bows, javelins, and other things due to its piercing and ease of use and ease of otherwise. How do you go about understanding that yes, that is one the sling is 100% underpowered by comparison to what it represents within there? Like how would you go about being like, well, I can't change it?
Point to a time in the historical record where someone cast fireball.
So you just go with the whole like this is
answer.
fantasy.
It's a game.
Yeah,
it's a game, and the game has certain constructs. If we were playing a game that was not a fantasy game, we would be using different constructs. So for example, in this game setting, we are going with the assumption that firearms technology has not yet been developed and that black powder is just barely in its infancy as something that exists. If we look at the historical record, that would not jive with the other technology that exists. If we look at what
that awkward moment
when our global history
when ball bearings were developed after gunpowder.
Like there are some of these things that are just a function of this is how the game is structured, and we have to we have to, we can choose not to accept its internal logic, right? We could choose to change it, but then you hit that point of, at what point do you stop changing it? What are the things that you accept as reasonable, and the things where you say, well, that's not historically, it's not history. It's not a history game. It is a fantasy role-playing game rooted very much in ultimately in a Tolkien-esque universe, right? And the game is written that way, it is created that way. And I think that we need to be aware of that. And that's perfectly okay. You know, because again, I don't know of anybody in history who has cast Fireball.
So there was this one guy who ate a bunch of mushrooms.
Greek fire? Sure. You know?
Yeah, that was...
Nobody's town is being attacked by a dragon.
Yeah.
Those
Although that would have been really cool.
Stories. And this is a story. So, yes, some things that in real life would be more powerful are less powerful. Things that are powerful in this game don't exist in real life. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about this, but yeah, the explaining the economy and like the fact that gold is legitimately valuable took way longer for me than anything else. Because it was weird for me to be like, no, like a gold is a lot. I know you just got 5 gold for completing this. You have to understand that like 5 gold to an average peasant is like,
oh yeah,
like winning the lottery or something.
The economics of the game are ludicrous.
They are.
Especially in context of coming back to history, especially in context of history. You know, a great book, I'm going to tangent here for a moment, but a great book
Go for it.
For folks to read, I think, is David Graeber's Debt, The First 5,000 Years. And it blows apart most of our myths about economics and the idea that we went from a barter and trade economy immediately to a currency type economy. And you know, Graeber, who passed away this year, he
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he back over the summer. I don't believe it was COVID related. Something else. But his background is in ethnography. So he has gone and studied these various cultures across the world that have different systems of interacting with the world, and he has this deep sociological background that he draws upon in the book, and basically just says the stories that we tell ourselves about debt and economics are myths in the same way that the Greeks and Romans and Egyptians had myths. They became stories that were solidified by history. And some of it is rooted in a real place, and some of it's not.
Just to make sure I'm thinking of the same book, if I remember correctly, like one of the major arguments of that was like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was like debt is the oldest means of trade rather than our like understanding of cash and barter economics. Yeah. Okay, so we are okay. Just wanted to make sure. I was like, am I thinking of the same book? Like,
yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that our modern much of our modern thinking about debt also equates debt with the sort of the biblical ideas of sin, and that the debt that really there's an atonement process that is part of it, and that's why it's important to pay your debts, is because you're atoning for something. And
yeah, and then it was increased by the state subjugated violence and stuff. The fascinating read. I will 100% agree with you there. Yeah.
Great book. All right. Well, we've been going at it for about an hour and a half now, so I am going to go ahead and and wrap things up here. Thurl, thanks for jumping in. Thanks for sharing the link to your reasonable magic items prices document. I'm going to steal that. I don't know if you created it or if you stole it from somebody else, but one way or the other, I'm going to give you credit for it. Canadiana, you're welcome on the slings idea. Yeah, so thank you everybody for jumping in. Drew, thanks for taking time to talk today. We are 2 full weeks away from this campaign kicking off and live streaming on December 16th. And
Yeah,
our first non-streamed session is this Wednesday. So I know that all of my players are hyper excited to actually sit down and finally get to start playing after almost 6 weeks of prep and planning and developing and getting to this point. So I guess I should probably start thinking about this campaign a little bit and come up with some ideas. So
you know, just write sexy goblins on a post-it note, slap it on the screen.
Right. Roll for initiative.
Exactly. There you go.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly...
All right, Drew. Well, thanks for taking the time and jumping in. I will
Thanks for having me.
talk to you soon enough. Thank you, chat, and everybody else for jumping in. Steph, thank you for producing. And we'll see you on Wednesday, same bat time, 4:30 Eastern time, for our final player interview with our very own Sarah. So see you on Wednesday. Take care. Cheers.